All right, everyone, welcome back to, I can't even remember the name of the show, Hate Live. That's pretty bad. Welcome back to Joe's Adventures. What? I don't know. So yeah, segment 2, back in the day. What I'm going to do is give you guys an abridged, and I mean really abridged version of my life here in Connecticut. The things that I've done for work, for school, for enjoyment, and kind of just run through a history of my life from start to finish, because now I really do feel that this move to Washington is the beginning of the next major chapter in my life. So I was born in April of 1982, and I was born in the middle of a blizzard. I kid you not. It was the first week of April, and there was an effing blizzard to the point where my dad couldn't even get to the hospital in time to see my birth in person. He was there, got there a little bit late because there was so much snow. There was no physical way he could get there to be there in time. I guess my mom had been at the hospital for several days, and so my dad wasn't there the whole time. He'd been working and then going back, etc., etc. But yeah, born in a snowstorm, so you knew that was going to be something special, right? And I grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut. At that point, I hate to say it, at that point it was a great neighborhood. Lots of friendly people of all kinds of cultures, of all kinds of nationalities and ethnic backgrounds. Although there were a lot of people that were Italian and Polish, but there were also, African Americans, there were Hispanics. There was a lot of variety of the people who lived around my neighborhood. And I remember growing up, when I was a small child, I was a huge fan of action figures. If you could get me G.I. Joe, He-Man, Transformers, any of that stuff, I was in love with it. And then I remember the first major fad in my life was when I saw the Ghostbusters movie, which I saw after it was new. I saw it, on television or whatever, and I freaking loved it. I fell in love with it. I would sit there and watch the damn movie on loop, sometimes 2-3 times in a day during, the summer. And it was pretty crazy that I would go on these crazy, trends, and that was one of them. Ghostbusters, and of course the Ghostbuster cartoon came on TV, Ghostbusters action figures, and I was all over the Ghostbusters. I even remember saying, I hope one day they make a Ghostbusters 2. And then finally they did, and it was the best thing ever when I started seeing the previews for Ghostbusters 2. I had local friends in the neighborhood. My next door neighbor's name was Ned. He was a little bit younger than me, a few years younger than me. 1 or 2 houses over, there was a kid named Raymond, and he was a real close friend of mine. He would come over all the time. We would play video games. We would play action figures. We would do all kinds of stuff together. There were other neighborhood kids as well that would come by every once in a while to play stuff, but it wasn't. It was usually that was the core group, the 3 of us. And as you grow up, you start going to school. My first school was St. Ambrose School in Bridgeport, Connecticut. It doesn't exist anymore. It closed down. And I started there in kindergarten, which when I was 5 years old, and I actually went there all the way through 8th grade. So you're talking 5 years old all the way up to, what is that? 14 or 15? I think it's 15, right? 15 years old, 14 or 15. So that's a good chunk of my life. That was a good, 8 years, if not more, that I went to this school. It's a big run, right? What other things can you say that you actually did for your life for 8 years? Pretty crazy. And so, yeah, I went to St. Ambrose School. It's a Catholic school, which was weird. I mean, my parents were trying to raise me Catholic, but I only knew the basics about, Jesus or whoever. It was really when I started going to this school and they started teaching you the religious portions, and you start getting into the dogmas and the doctrines and the Old Testament and the New Testament and the old God and the new God that's nice and forgiving, and the Son of God and the Holy Trinity and the sacraments. Oh God, the sacraments. How I had to do all that stuff, and it was first, getting Holy Communion was the most important thing on the planet. I remember when I did it, and man, it was pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy doing all that stuff. And then finally, when I graduated from St. Ambrose School, started to become a little bit more independent-minded, started to think a little bit more about, when I go to church, what is it that I'm really doing, right? I'm sitting here on a Sunday. I just remember. I remember this one particular Sunday. I'm sitting there at church, and everyone's, they're singing, and they're saying their prayers, and blah, blah. Half the people, I swear, they're falling asleep. Half the people are falling asleep in church, literally. They just don't give a shit. They're only there to go through the motions. The other half are, so into it or whatever, and I'm like, if you really cared about people, wouldn't you be like doing something right now? Like instead of sitting in church, all kind of like reciting at the same time like a cult, why don't you go work in a soup kitchen on Sunday and help people? You know? And I just remember that striking me. I was like, why am I here? You know? Like, I could be doing so many better things with my life than sitting in a church and chanting this thing in unison, you know? And that was kind of like the dawn of like independent thought for me, you know? Where my whole life I had been raised by my parents and their dogmas and doctrines and then the Catholic Church and all that. And it was just this epiphany that happened to me that there may be better things in my life that I could figure out for my own rather than just listening to what everyone told me, right? And I started becoming a rebellious youth. I'll be honest. I started becoming a rebellious youth. And so I'd say probably about midway through high school, I started to, how can I explain? I started to just kind of like almost rebel. Meaning, why am I doing everything that I've been told my whole life? In high school, by the way, I went to another Catholic school course. This is all my parents' idea. Another Catholic school, Notre Dame Catholic school in Fairfield, Connecticut. Completely, them doing shit and telling me what to do with my life. And I just basically remember going to this school, and the first 2 years of going to this school, I busted my ass, okay? I bent over backwards. I worked my ass to the bone to have straight A's. Because my parents had convinced me, if you do that, you're gonna go to a great college, you're gonna get scholarships, you're gonna go places, and you could be an important rich person one day. 2 years of getting straight A's, okay? I said, why am I doing all this fucking work? I really get the feeling that this is not gonna pay off. I should be enjoying my high school years, not literally working every fucking moment. So I did that. Junior year, my whole mentality changed. And even though I continued to still get good grades, maybe it wasn't straight A's, right? Yeah, it's okay to let your kid have a B every once in a while. I mean, stickler fucking parents. And I started hanging out with my friends more. I started doing more things that were, things that youthful teenagers do versus just study all fucking day. And I still remember, and it was funny because it all became true, of course, when I finally graduated from high school in the year 2000. I was the valedictorian. A lot of people won't believe me. I was the valedictorian of my high school. Regardless of the fact that I wasn't like a super nerdy type or anything, I had ended up being the highest ranked in my school. And I didn't get accepted to any of the high-toity colleges, which if you're supposed to be the smartest person that you should get into, right? Yale rejected me. Harvard rejected me. There were 3 of them. I can't even remember what the third one was. But every Ivy League school that I applied to said, no. When you want to know why they rejected me, it's this simple. Because I'm a white male. Because I don't belong to any of the families that are what they call legacies. Rich families that have already sent their kids to those schools. Okay. I didn't have any kind of insanely special quality for me to get in, right? I didn't know anyone. I wasn't in the in crowd of people who, we got to get him in. And I wasn't a minority to hit their minority quotas, and I wasn't a sports star to hit their sports quotas. I was just a smart, normal kid. And that's not what Ivy League looks for. Ivy League does not want the smartest kids. They want to keep this conformist group of fucking people, right? These high echelon people, the Bushes, the people who go, just look at the people who go there and realize their family is gone there forever. Because they're trying to keep this 1% in power. And they know that if you go to those schools, regardless if you're smart or dumb as fucking dirt, you could be the president of the United States. Just look at George W. Bush, the dumbest motherfucker I've ever met in my life, is a fucking idiot. And he was the president of the United States simply because he's in that family and he went to an Ivy League school. It's a joke. Okay? So after years of me busting my ass, when I hit college, I said, fuck this shit. I'm so not busting my ass anymore. It's not worth it. And I realized it's all about who you know and if you're privileged or if you're not. And I knew no one and I wasn't privileged. So I went through college, just going through the motions to get through it. Originally I was going to do computer programming. That didn't work out. I went to Fairfield University, by the way, which I quickly found out was not the kind of people that I am. What I mean by that is almost 95% of the people who went to Fairfield University were rich. They all had tons of money. Their parents would pay for their cars, pay for everything, pay their whole fucking way. I was not. I was only there because I had a scholarship. It was the only way I could afford to go there. I still had to take out student loans because it wasn't a full scholarship. They didn't offer full scholarships. And not to say that it was a bad school for business, it was actually quite a good school. But really at that point, after finding out that their computer science department was terrible because the teacher was awful, and me changing majors and going into business, I was like, I will get as good grades as I can. And I don't care about getting straight A's anymore. This is a waste of my time. Primarily what I did while I went to college is I worked on the side. And so now let's start talking about my work life. All throughout high school and then into college, I had a job that I had at a local mall. And I like to joke about it. I used to say I pumped salad. I'm sorry, I pumped salad. What the fuck? I tossed salad and pumped yogurt for a living. You know, because I know how to laugh about myself. I worked at a health food store and there's frozen yogurt and custom-made salads. That's what we did there. I did that for almost 5 years, making minimum wage the whole time. And I used that to pay my way through different events. So my hobby was video games and Street Fighter. I used that to pay to go to tournaments, to pay to fly across the country, to B5, to pay to go to ECC and other events. So that was really the way that I financed my whole hobbies, was through working. And also I used that to pay my student loans off. And then when I was in college, I remember I wanted to do a slight upgrade during late college, so I quit that job. I eventually got a job at Circuit City, which doesn't exist anymore, but there used to be an electronics chain very similar to Best Buy, where, you know, they had cameras, they had laptops, they had TVs, they had DVDs, music, CDs, stereo systems, they had a car department, all that stuff. And I actually worked at Circuit City for about, I believe it was about 2 years through college, until finally at the end of college, when I graduated college, and I said, well, I have a degree in finance now. I fuck it all if I know what to do with it. Because when I went to start applying for jobs, it was, well, do you want to work an unpaid internship for a year? Like, well, how do I do that? I can't pay my bills. I can't pay off my student loans. I can't pay for anything if I have an unpaid internship. How do they expect me to be able to do it? So I couldn't. I couldn't do any of the internships. And the banks and the investment firms don't want to just hire someone with no experience. So I had no way to get any experience because I couldn't afford to have an unpaid internship. And no one would hire you otherwise. So I was out of luck. I had a degree that I could do nothing with. So eventually I ended up working for a company that I thought had to do with finance, and really it had nothing to do with it at all. It was Wells Fargo Financial, which was just a mortgage company where you would give mortgages to people, small loans, unsecured credit cards. I worked there for about a year, only to find out that really the purpose of that business was to be a predatory lender and to actually lend only to people with low credit. So really what we would do is we would find people with low credit scores who were desperate. We would give them loans on their houses that were extremely high value on their house, put in all their debt, and then next thing you know, the market fell out and everyone's houses got foreclosed on because they couldn't afford to pay the payments and they had no equity in their house anymore. That's literally what the business was. So after a year of being there and me having major disagreements with the manager because he just did not like me, I ended up leaving that job. That was incidentally the year that ties into last year's story about Evo 2005, because that was the year that I did Evo 2005 after leaving that job, but before I went on to my next one. My next job was working as a business associate or business team specialist at Best Buy. And what my job was supposed to be was that I would learn about networking and I would learn about PCs, which I already knew about. As I told you guys, I used to build PCs, I used to do networking, I used to do all that stuff. But I was supposed to have the resources. If someone came in and said, I'm setting up my own small business and I need computers in there and I need point of sale systems and all that, I was supposed to be able to sell them all that stuff. It never came to fruition because about 6 months into the program, they dumped all the resources. The company said they didn't want to do it anymore. And they realized they had hired these people. They were paying us a lot of money and we really didn't have anything to fucking do. They literally had us covering the floor being normal sales associates because they canceled the program after 6 months. Our boss, who was our manager, got fired. The district guy who was supposed to be in charge of the program almost never even came by the store anymore. And eventually he was transitioned out. And then after a year working at Best Buy, they wanted to get rid of everyone in the business team because we were getting paid too much money. And they eventually framed me. Yes, they framed me, saying that I abused the store discount policy by saving $1.20 on buying 3 PlayStation 2s, which I used in a video game tournament, and they fired me for it, which I appealed, and I won the appeal. I got a massive amount of unemployment money out of them, and made them look like a bunch of jackasses. So, some crazy stuff I've been through in my life, right? So then, to give you some perspective on how this has worked, I lived with my parents my whole life up until I got that job at Wells Fargo Financial. During that period of time, I moved out of my parents' house, and I actually got a 3-bedroom apartment, which I shared with 2 roommates who were other employees of Wells Fargo Financial at the time, and that was up in New Haven, Connecticut, okay? I had that apartment for a year. Unfortunately, one of the roommates wasn't very reliable, and he wanted to move out, and we were going to get stuck with an apartment with an extra apartment. And at that point, I stopped working at that job, lost that job, and started working at Best Buy. But what I found out working at Best Buy is that even with the amount of money they were paying me, I wasn't making a hell of a lot of money, and I really couldn't afford to have this apartment. In addition, because I had to leave that other job, and as I told you, to go to Evo 2005, I had racked up my credit card bills like sky high. I owed a ton of credit card debt, and I really couldn't afford the apartment anymore. So I ended up, when I got the Best Buy job, moving back out from New Haven, back in with my parents. So how many people in life can say that they moved out of their parents' house, they felt like they were going to be successful on their own, things didn't work out, and they had to move back into their parents' house? That's literally what happened to me. Then I ended up finally getting a job after the Best Buy debacle at a place called Helicopter Support Incorporated. This was also in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Actually, I take that back. I think Helicopter Support was just over the Trumbull line. So they were considered Trumbull, not Bridgeport. Okay? And this job was so different than anything I'd done. Customer service. So you're the face of the company to the customer. Customers would come to me and say, Phil, I have a helicopter and I operate it myself, but this particular part broke. My mechanic told me this part broke. What can you do for me? And I would go out there and look, do any companies have the part available? Do we maybe have the part available? Because we had a huge inventory of helicopter parts in our inventory. If it was a really expensive part, like a helicopter blade, that costs so much money to make that no one wants to buy a new one, we had an actual shop where people worked on helicopter parts and blades and stuff like that, where we would talk to them, gee, do you have a refurb? Do you have something available that we could get this customer right away as a more inexpensive way to get them flying again? And that was my job. I was basically the go-between between customers and our company, finding parts for people and getting those parts out to the operators. What ended up happening was that 3 years into me being at this job, which I got nothing but great ratings, promotions, all kinds of great stuff, the economy turned. And when the economy turned, unfortunately, what ended up happening was that the company had record increase. I'm doing it the wrong direction. No, I was doing it the right direction. Record increase sales, and then it plateaued, and then it went because no one could afford to operate a helicopter anymore because the economy had turned in the United States. So this company that at one point when I started working there was prosperous, record year, after 3 years of me being there started to tank. Unfortunately, during that period of time, I decided to buy this condo. So finally, after moving back in with my parents for like 3 years, I moved back out again and moved into this condo into the summer of 2009. And as you guys know, it was during that period of time that I started doing YouTube as a hobby. I also hurt my back, or didn't really hurt it, but I found out about the severely herniated disc in my lower back and found out that I couldn't do physical stuff anymore, like play football or anything like that. So I ended up doing a lot more less physical activities like gaming a hell of a lot more. So I buy this place in 2009 and, start doing my thing with YouTube and everything in it. In fact, I still remember when I had the office job, when Batman Arkham Asylum came out, I actually took the day off of work. I took 2 days, actually, off of work just to play Batman Arkham Asylum because I knew it was going to be great. And you know what? I don't regret it at all. Even though they were my vacation days and I used them to play games, it was worth it. That game was great. The playthrough did well. You know what I mean? It was that kind of stuff that got me notoriety on YouTube back then. So, my hobby is booming. Everything at work is going well. People are saying I'm getting all these great evaluations, everything saying you're doing great, above and beyond. In fact, at this point, they started grooming me at this job around 2009 to be a lead in continuous improvement. And what that means is that they had this program where they were teaching people to become not these employees of customer support anymore, but to be advanced in the business. What you would do, you would look at a process, so let's say the repair process to repair a part at the company, and you would say, what's step 1, step 2, step 3, all the way till the end of the process, of where maybe the part comes into the building to when it leaves the building and goes to the customer. You would map out the process, you would time each step, you would find out at what points do we have problems in our process, right? When do we have problems, and we mark them off, and it was your job to eliminate those problems or cut them down or revamp the process to save time and money. And I became trained to do this. I actually have a certification on the wall in my bedroom ACE, Achieving Competitive Excellence, where I became considered an associate. It's the first major level of achievement in training for it. I ran events. I was in charge of completely redesigning the repairs process in our building from start to finish, and I did it. I mapped it out. I did this whole thing. No one else did stuff like this. I was the only person who was doing stuff like this because they trusted me to do it. So I revamped the whole process. We revamped the whole computer system and all this, right? So all this was happening between 2009 2010 as I was paired with doing my YouTube hobby here at home. And then all of a sudden in the middle of 2010, basically here's what happened. Like I said, all of a sudden they started pissing money away. They were making no money anymore, this company, because the economy turned. They decided they were going to do a reorganization of the company. Let me tell you something. If you work for a company that's doing a reorganization, you're up shit's creek. Because what that means is that they are failing and they need to reorganize and screw people over and kick people out and do stuff real nasty to keep the company afloat. And what happened in this case, they did a reorg where they took me out of this department where I was doing all this great work and they put me in a completely different department. And the management there didn't know who I was, didn't know about my skill set, didn't care about ACE at all. They literally didn't care for the fact that I had done all this above and beyond work, had gotten recommendations and achievement awards and everything. The management there didn't give a fuck about me, and after 3 months they laid me off. And it was like, wow, what a fail. What a fail by that company. And by the way, that company is now going out of business. They are in the process of going out of business. They're laid off probably about 50 to 75% of their workforce, and it's looking like they're going to go completely out of business. Or what they'll do, they won't go out of business, but they'll just have the entire workforce outsourced to some third world country, where everyone gets paid $1 an hour, and that's where that will exist from now on. It's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic what a failure that company turned out to be, but I digress. So what ended up happening, I get laid off in 2010, and me, living here for only a year, and really having nothing to fall back on, because like I said, I was blindsided at the time. It was like I had all these great recommendations and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden they just laid me off. It was like, what do I do now? The industry had tanked. Remember, the industry had tanked when the economy turned. There was no available positions anywhere in Connecticut or anywhere in this area, for that matter, to do similar work. I mean, I could have started from the bottom, but how do I pay for my condo, right, when I'm getting a minimum wage job? Even working 2-3 minimum wage jobs, there's no way I would have been able to afford this place anymore. And I said, I have to do something. I'm in dire straits. And at that point, in late 2010, I said, I'm just going to try to make a run for it. Let's make YouTube my full-time thing, and let's see if we can make it work. And even then, it hasn't been easy. There's been lots of ups and downs. I would say, that was a low, and then all of a sudden, the surge of popularity and support I got from YouTube was a high. Being signed by Machinima was a high. And then all of a sudden, I had a decline in 2012 where people were like, I was getting too stagnant. I needed to adjust. I wasn't, using the newest equipment or anything anymore. And there was a low. And then, of course, at the end of that year, when I took a big pay cut, boom, that was a low. And then I'd say last year it was kind of going up again, reinvigoration. I went to direct capture and live streaming, and that was a great thing for me. And now, of course, again, they're going on down again, because now you've got the bullshit of everyone on the internet thinks that I'm Satan or something, because it's a bunch of little immature kids who hate me and want to make hate montages about me. And even though there may be the 1% of the people who are actually doing that who have a snippet of truth, the fact that that's their whole goal, and they don't see the fact that they're hurting me by doing that negative shit, right? That they're not teaching me a lesson that's not improving my product. No, they're actually hurting me as a person by doing that negative shit. But they don't understand that because they're not mature adults, right? They don't have the ability to look in other people's shoes, right? Walk in other people's shoes and see from another perspective. And that's why they do negative, nasty shit like that, thinking that, oh, it's funny and it's good. It's not. And if you live your life like that, you're never going to get anywhere. You're just going to be a negative person your whole fucking life, and you're never going to enjoy anything, okay? But anyway, I digress. That's where I am now. And you know what? Now, here I am in my life. I'm about to leave Connecticut, and I'm going to go to the West Coast, and it's probably, hopefully, going to be a massive positive thing. We'll go back up on the roller coaster ride of life, right? This is how my life's been. Ups and downs, and it never seems to just level out. You get high highs and low lows, and